There is a story the American labor movement has told itself for generations. A story of Flint, of CIO sit-downs, of coal miners standing shoulder to shoulder in the dark. But there is another story it has worked very hard to forget. One that begins not on American shop floors, but on the docks of Haifa and in the factories where weapons were assembled for a colonial project half a world away. Jeff Schuhrke's No Neutrals There rips open that silence, and reading it feels like standing in front of a century-old mirror, suddenly seeing all the ghosts labor history has tried to hide. The book opens in the shadow of Gaza 2023, a moment when Palestinian trade unions called on the world for solidarity, and the AFL-CIO bureaucracy once again flinched. Not out of confusion, but out of a long, well-documented tradition of aligning with empire. That moral cowardice becomes Schuhrke's doorway into a story that stretches back over 100 years. Schuhrke rewinds to the early 20th century, to the immigrant Jewish workers of New York City, Bondists, anarchists, socialists, who wanted nothing to do with Zionism. For them, liberation was something you fought for where you stood, on the shop floor, in the street, not in a mythic homeland promised by the powerful. But slowly, inevitably, things changed. Labor Zionism crafted a seductive image of a socialist virtue, collective farms, egalitarian dreams, making the desert bloom. And American Union leaders, steeped in their own settler mythology, saw a reflection they liked. Schuhrke draws a line that feels almost painfully obvious once he traces it. The Zionist fantasy of redeeming the land through Jewish labor mirrored the American fantasy of the frontier. The same blindness to the people already living there, the same belief in a civilizing mission. It was the logical extension of a movement born inside an empire. Across the decades, the AFL and later the AFL-CIO became not just supporters but active partners of the Zionist project. Schuhrke's archival work shows union dues flowing to the Jewish National Fund. Delegations of labor leaders touring kibbutzim while Palestinian villages lay in ruins just out of frame. The Histadrot treated as a fraternal ally, while it enforced the racial divide between Jewish and Arab workers. Through the Cold War, AFL-CIO operatives used language of solidarity to build pro-US unions abroad, while praising Israel as a model ally, a democratic socialist outpost that conveniently crushed communists and disciplined the Arab poor. In 1982, amid the Israeli invasion of Lebanon, the Federation declared proudly, "The AFL-CIO is not neutral. We support Israel." Schuhrke turns that boost into a moral indictment. But the book is not only an excavation of betrayal, it's also a rescue mission, a reminder that another history exists, buried under the bureaucratic weight of the official narrative. He brings back the voices of Arab American workers, black radicals, anti-Zionist Jewish organizers, and rank-and-file militants who refused the easy alignment with power. He traces the moment when workers took real risks. The ILWU longshore workers refusing to handle apartheid cargo, electrical workers linking US imperialism, South African apartheid, and Palestinian dispossession as parts of the same machine. Small acts maybe, but signs that solidarity was never completely dead. Schuhrke writes with a clarity that almost feels out of time, he does not hide his outrage when he describes how union officials rationalized Israeli massacres as self-defense. But he also doesn't flatten that into caricature. He lays out the patronage networks, the fear of government repression, the hunger for respectability, all the forces that pushed labor leaders to trade moral clarity for political access. When he returns to the Gaza war of 2023, the parallels are unmistakable. The AFL-CIO's deference to the Biden administration, its silence as US-made bombs crushed hospitals and apartment blocks, the old reflexes resurfacing, and yet something different too. A new generation of workers beginning to rebel, graduate students, teachers, postal workers, rank-and-file teamsters. They have begun demanding ceasefire resolutions, questioning weapons shipments, trying to drag their unions back towards an internationalism worth the name. Schuhrke treats these as not isolated flashes, but as early tremors of a deeper shift. What makes non-neutrals there so striking is its sense of purpose. Schuhrke is a historian, yes, but he writes like someone at the picket line, not the archive. He moves between dusty resolutions and living political struggles with a sense of urgency that feels earned. For him, history is a weapon, not a static artifact, something to wield against the alibis of the present. And he refuses the romantic myth of labor Zionism. The book dismantles the idea that kibbutz was ever a socialist experiment gone wrong. It was built on stolen land, structured through exclusion, managed as part of a labor federation that was also one of the country's biggest employers. American unionists saw in it a projection of their own fantasies, a moral capitalism that never existed. But Schuhrke is not only telling an American story, he's describing a universal pattern. The way labor bureaucracies across the world, including the global south, align with power, silence dissent, and use the language of solidarity as diplomatic theater. For readers from Egypt or Brazil or South Africa, the echoes are unmistakable. In the end, the book circles back to a simple idea. Every generation of workers faces its own test, its own Palestine, a moment when neutrality is revealed for what it is, complicity. Schuhrke ends with a sentence that lingers long after you put the book down. He writes that if labor can help bring freedom to a land scarred by empire, then hope for the world is not naive. That line carries the book's spirit, mournful, defiant, clear-eyed about the past, but stubborn enough to believe in a different future. And maybe that's the melancholy heart of this story, a labor movement that could have stood on the side of the dispossessed, but chose power instead, yet also a movement that can still choose another path. If solidarity is to matter again, it has to cross checkpoints. It has to refuse the comfort of neutrality. It has to remember the ghosts that Schuhrke brings back to the light.